Glass shatters. Guests freeze. The bride stands trembling, her hand mid-air. You never think the perfect day will unravel, until the moment you realize it's unraveled right in front of you. It was midday on a crisp October afternoon when Emma walked into the grand hall of her childhood friend's house, the scent of magnolias drifting through the open windows, and the buzz of guests greeting each other in warm laughter. She balanced a plate of hors d'oeuvres and a flute of champagne as she searched for Sarah, the bride-to-be. The two had grown up together in a sleepy American town, shared secrets in high school lockers, and dreamed aloud of weddings just like this one. Sarah's dress hung in a side room, white satin shimmering in the afternoon light, and somewhere beyond, the band began tuning up. Emma stepped into the foyer and stopped cold. There, in the center of the room, Sarah's maid of honor, Megan, stood with her face flushed, her eyes locked on a woman Sarah recognized from college, a woman who had quietly hovered on the fringes of their friendship group for years. Emma held her breath as Megan raised her voice. "How could you be here after everything?" The room fell silent. Sarah froze. The woman stepped forward, removed her jacket, and the confrontation spiraled within seconds. An exchanged glare, a whispered accusation, and then Megan's hand rose and struck the woman across the cheek. Gasps erupted. Emma dropped her plate. Sarah's heart thundered. Memory flooded her. The same woman had once asked Sarah for help with her failing business. Sarah had helped, and now she stood crying, face turned away. Emma moved to Sarah's side, but Sarah felt rooted to the spot. The toast was scheduled in 15 minutes. The guests around them whispered. The bride's world shifted in that heartbeat. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Amara, the kind of woman whose presence filled a room long before she spoke. She had built her life with precision and poise, a reflection of years spent fighting to prove she was more than just beautiful. Every detail of her wedding mirrored that same determination. The gold-trimmed glasses, the hand-woven centerpieces that paid homage to her African heritage, and the gentle rhythm of Afro-soul music drifting through the air. To the guests, she was the embodiment of grace. To her, this moment was the culmination of everything she had ever dreamed of. Standing beside her was Chinedu, her groom, humble, calm and kind in ways that often made people wonder how two so different souls had found one another. Where Amara was fire, Chinedu was water. He didn't chase the spotlight. He built his world quietly, brick by brick, as the CEO of a growing logistics company. His employees called him the man who never raised his voice, and his friends often joked that Amara brought the chaos he never knew he needed. Together, they balanced one another perfectly. At least, that's what everyone believed. The wedding itself was nothing short of breathtaking. A fusion of modern African-American luxury and cultural elegance. Crystal chandeliers glistened above tables dressed in white silk, while traditional drummers played softly in the background. Laughter mingled with the aroma of jollof rice and grilled steak, and even the wind outside seemed to dance with the rhythm of celebration. To the guests, it felt like the kind of love story that would never break. But among the servers moving swiftly between tables, there was one woman who didn't seem to belong. She was older, her hair streaked with gray beneath a simple head wrap. Her posture was proud, but her eyes carried the quiet heaviness of someone who had seen too much. No one knew her name. She had been hired last minute by the catering company to fill in for a sick worker. She smiled politely, avoided attention, and carried trays with the grace of someone far too refined for a temporary job. Every now and then, her gaze lingered on Chinedu. Not long, not enough for anyone else to notice, but if you looked closely, you could feel something familiar. She seemed to study him, not as a stranger would, but as someone remembering the face of a loved one lost long ago. And as the night went on, she found small moments to glance his way. When he laughed with the groomsmen, when he adjusted Amara's veil, when he thanked the guests for coming. Her eyes softened each time, like a mother seeing her child after many years. But she said nothing. She simply worked, quietly, almost reverently. The truth, though, was that she wasn't there to serve. Her presence had a purpose, one tied to a secret Chinadu had buried deep within his past, a truth that, if revealed, could shatter everything this wedding stood for. And as the celebration continued and the night grew older, one question lingered in the air like smoke over a dying fire. Why was she really there that night? As the evening unfolded, the rhythm of joy began to shift. It was subtle at first, a whisper here, a quiet stare there, but soon the air carried something unspoken, something uneasy. Guests seated near the back began murmuring to one another, their voices barely above a hush. They spoke about the older woman moving between tables with calm precision. One said, "She looks familiar." Another replied, "I can't quite place it, but I've seen those eyes before." And yet, no one dared approach her. There was something in her demeanor that commanded quiet respect, almost as if she didn't belong in the world of hired staff at all. From her table, Amara began to notice it too. Between laughter and conversation, she would catch the woman's silhouette gliding through the lights, never too close, never too far. But what unsettled Amara most wasn't the woman's presence. It was how the woman seemed to avoid her gaze. Each time their eyes nearly met, the woman turned away, pretending to fix a centerpiece or refill a glass. At first, Amara brushed it off. There were over 100 guests. Perhaps she was imagining things, but something in her gut whispered otherwise. Across the room, Chinadu tried his best to maintain the charm everyone admired him for. He greeted his uncles, posed for photos, shared light jokes with his best man, but once or twice, Amara noticed his eyes drift toward the serving line, just briefly, a quick glance, but the kind that carried weight, the kind that spoke without words, and every time he looked, it was always at her, the mysterious older woman. Emma, Amara's maid of honor, leaned in and whispered, "Do you know that woman? She's been watching your husband since the ceremony." Amara smiled faintly, trying to dismiss it, though her voice trembled when she replied, "Maybe she's just doing her job." But her heart didn't believe her own words. Then came a small, almost unnoticeable moment, a flicker of something gold near the woman's wrist. Amara saw it as the woman bent down to pick up a dropped napkin, a bracelet, old and worn, but engraved with delicate initials, CE. The sight of it made Amara pause. Those same initials matched the monogram on Chinedu's baby blanket she had once found in his keepsake box. She hadn't thought about it in years. But there it was, gleaming softly under the chandelier light. Amara blinked, trying to convince herself it was coincidence. Still, her heartbeat grew louder. The laughter around her faded into distant echoes. She turned to look at her husband again, and this time, she saw it. The fleeting moment when Chinedu's and the woman's eyes met across the hall. It wasn't the look of strangers. It was the look of two souls who shared something heavy, something unspoken. The woman's lips trembled slightly, as though she wanted to speak, but swallowed her words instead. Chinedu looked away quickly, pretending to adjust his cufflinks, his jaw tightening. The silence between them, though invisible to others, screamed louder than the music that filled the hall. As Amara raised her glass for another toast, her smile held firm. But inside her mind, questions began to tear through every thought. Who was that woman? Why was her husband avoiding her eyes? Why did the guests whisper every time she passed? And somewhere deep within her, a voice whispered, a quiet warning she didn't yet understand. If Amara had looked closer that night, she would have seen her future collapsing before her eyes. Years earlier, in the dust-red outskirts of the city, long before the chandeliers and champagne toasts, there lived a woman who carried the weight of two lives on her shoulders, her own and her son's. Her name was Ngozi, though most people simply called her Mama Chinedu. The sun was always harsh there, the kind that painted the sky orange by noon and left the ground cracked by dusk. Every morning, she would rise before the first rooster crowed, tie her faded wrapper around her waist, and whisper a quiet prayer over her sleeping boy. Then she would set out for the market, with nothing but baskets of produce and faith to keep her going. Life had not been kind to her. Her husband had passed suddenly, an accident that left her alone with a child barely old enough to understand what loss meant. The neighbors pitied her, but pity didn't feed a growing boy. So, she worked. Some days, she sold tomatoes under the scorching sun until her feet swelled. Other days, she washed clothes for families who never learned her name. But no matter how tired she was, she would always save the last bit of her meal for her son. Hunger became her shadow, sacrifice her only companion. When the rains came, the roof leaked. When the dry season returned, dust filled every corner of their small home. Yet through all of it, she never let despair win. Each night, she sat beside Chinedu's bed, her calloused hands stroking his hair, whispering, "You will be more than this, my son. You will wear a suit, not a burden." And even when her body ached and her heart feared the world's cruelty, she believed it with every breath she took. Chinedu grew watching that strength. He saw the way she endured hunger without complaint, how she laughed even when her eyes betrayed exhaustion. He swore he would make her proud, that he would lift her out of the life that had stolen so much from her. Every achievement he reached, every opportunity he chased, carried her fingerprints. She was the reason behind his ambition, the quiet power behind every success. But time has a way of twisting even the purest promises. As Chinedu's world began to expand, his mother's world began to fade. University, business trips, new friends, each step forward took him farther from the woman who had once been his entire universe. He called less, visited less, and each year, his success built walls instead of bridges. And yet, Mama Chinedu never complained. She would sit by her window every evening, the same window from which she once watched him play, holding the bracelet he had given her as a boy. It was engraved with his initials, C.E., a small golden reminder of a son who once said, "I'll never forget you, Mama." But success can be cruel. It forgets the hands that built it. And that night, as she stood among strangers at her son's wedding, wearing the uniform of a server, no one could have imagined the truth. The woman everyone whispered about was not just any stranger. She was the mother he had left behind. Back in the present, the morning of the wedding had begun like a carefully choreographed play. Every moment timed, every movement rehearsed. Amara stood before a mirror framed with gold, her reflection glowing beneath the soft morning light. Her hair was perfect, her gown flawless, her smile rehearsed. She had spent months making sure nothing could go wrong. Every flower, every ribbon, every spoon on every table was exactly where it was meant to be. The makeup artists whispered nervously around her, careful not to smudge the perfection she demanded. One stylist dropped a pin, and Amara's eyes flicked toward her with the kind of sharpness that froze the room. "Be careful," she said softly, but her tone carried enough weight to silence even the hum of the air conditioner. The planners admired her precision, but the truth was, Amara's perfection came from fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of being seen as anything less than the woman she had fought to become. This wedding wasn't just about love, it was about control, about proving that every scar from her past had been worth it. Yet beneath the polished surface, something in the air felt fragile, like glass ready to crack. Meanwhile, across town, Chinedu sat in his hotel room, already dressed in his crisp navy suit. The tie felt too tight. His reflection looked back at him, but instead of excitement, all he saw was unease. He ran a hand over his face and glanced at his phone. There were dozens of unread messages from friends, family, and colleagues, all congratulating him. But there was one name missing, one he had hoped to see, his mother's. She wasn't on the guest list, not because she wasn't loved, but because he had convinced himself she wouldn't fit into this new world of chandeliers and luxury halls. The truth was harder. He hadn't told her. He told himself it was for her own good, that she didn't need to endure the judgment of high society eyes. But deep down, he knew he was ashamed of the distance he had created between who he was and where he came from. As he adjusted his cufflinks, his phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call from an unknown number. The ringtone echoed in the quiet room. He stared at the screen, hesitating. A strange uneasiness gripped him, a small voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, he should answer. But then his best man called from the hallway, shouting, "Bro, it's time! The cars are ready!" Chinedu sighed, pressed the side button, and silenced the call. The phone went dark, the moment forgotten as quickly as it had come. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the room, his heart beating faster than usual. He didn't know that the person on the other end of that call was standing in a small market stall miles away, clutching an old phone with shaking hands, whispering, "My son, please just pick up." That single ignored call could have stopped everything. Success arrived for Chinedu like a sudden sunrise, bright, blinding, and impossible to ignore. The boy who once helped his mother carry baskets through the market now drove sleek cars down city streets lined with glass towers. His company grew faster than anyone expected. His name appeared in business magazines, and people began to call him a visionary. But with every headline, with every new friend who praised his brilliance, the distance between him and his mother widened, quietly, invisibly, like a bridge eroding in silence. At first, he tried to keep in touch. A few calls each week, a promise to visit soon, but meetings piled up, dinners ran late, and soon, even those promises turned to dust. His mother's voice became something he associated with guilt, something easier to silence than confront. He started sending money instead, large amounts, more than she could ever spend. But what she wanted wasn't his wealth. She wanted her son. In her small home at the edge of the city, Mama Chinedu waited. Every evening she would sit by the wooden table, her radio humming softly, hoping for his call. When it didn't come, she'd reach for pen and paper and write letters by candlelight, letters filled with stories of her garden, of neighbors asking about him, of her prayers for his safety. She sent them faithfully, never missing a week. But as the months passed, the letters began returning, unopened, each envelope stamped with the same words, "Recipient not available." Sometimes she'd try to reach him through the office number she found on a brochure. The secretary's voice was always polite, distant. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Chinedu is in a meeting." The line would click dead, leaving her listening to the emptiness that followed. Still, she didn't give up. She recorded voice messages on an old phone she barely knew how to use. "Hello, my son. It's Mama. I heard your company is growing. I thank God for you every day. Please don't forget to eat well. The nights here are cold now. Your old blanket is still here. Sometimes I cover myself with it just to feel close to you. If you ever get this message, know that your mother loves you. Always." Weeks turned into months. The messages were never returned. The city moved faster, and the world applauded him louder. And with every cheer, the sound of his mother's voice grew fainter, until one day it vanished completely. But fate has a way of reminding us of what we choose to forget. Because one quiet evening, years later, Chinedu found himself scrolling through old messages on a phone he hadn't used in ages. Among them was a single unread voicemail. He hesitated, then pressed play. His mother's voice filled the room, soft, trembling, filled with hope that he would one day come home. He sat there frozen as the message ended with a whisper, "I'm proud of you, my son." He called her number right after, heart pounding, guilt burning in his chest. The line rang once, twice. Then an unfamiliar voice answered. "I'm sorry," the woman said gently. "She passed away last week." And when he finally called her again, it was too late. When the news of Chinedu's wedding reached her, it wasn't through a phone call, nor a letter, nor even a message from him. It came from the lips of a neighbor, A woman passing by the market who said cheerfully, "Your son, the big man, is finally getting married. The papers even showed his fiancée, so beautiful." For a moment, Mama Chinedu couldn't breathe. She stood there in the middle of the crowd, her basket of yams slipping from her hands. Everyone around her kept moving, but time stopped for her. She whispered softly, "My son, he's getting married?" A smile trembled on her lips, but behind it lay the sharp sting of silence. She hadn't been invited, not even a message. That night she sat on her bed, the small room lit only by the flicker of a lantern. The wedding date circled in red ink on a torn newspaper page beside her. She waited day after day, telling herself that maybe the invitation got lost, maybe he'd surprise her last minute. Each morning she'd check her mailbox, and each evening she'd sit by her window, listening to the road for the sound of a delivery bike that never came. Days turned to weeks, and hope began to fade like an old photograph. But a mother's love does not surrender easily. As the wedding day approached, she made a quiet decision. She didn't want to interrupt his joy, didn't want to embarrass him by showing up unannounced. Yet her heart couldn't bear to stay away. She told herself, "If I can't be there as his guest, I will be there as his helper. I will still see my son get married, even if he doesn't see me." She borrowed a friend's uniform, wrapped her head in a plain scarf, and took a job from a small catering company that needed extra hands for a high-profile wedding. She didn't even ask for pay. All she wanted was to stand in the corner of the hall and witness the moment her boy took his vows. That morning, as she buttoned the faded white shirt, she paused for a long time in front of a mirror cracked from age. She looked at her reflection, wrinkles deepened by years of sacrifice, and smiled weakly. "He won't recognize me," she whispered, "but at least I'll see him happy." She tucked the golden bracelet with his initials, C.E., under her sleeve, kissed the small Bible on her nightstand, and set out for the venue. When she arrived, the music was already playing. The lights, the guests, the laughter. It was everything she had prayed for him to have. Her heart swelled with pride just seeing him in his suit, standing tall, looking fulfilled. She stood quietly at the back, holding a tray, her hands trembling not from the weight, but from the storm of emotions she was trying to hide. She wanted to cry, to run to him, to tell him she had kept every promise she ever made. But she stayed still, whispering to herself, "He's happy. That's all that matters." To everyone else, she was just another server. But to her, she was a mother, attending the greatest day of her son's life. No seat reserved, no name on the guest list. But her heart was there, full of pride, full of love, full of forgiveness he hadn't yet earned. But love disguised as humility can sometimes be mistaken for disrespect. The hall was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft rhythm of drums echoing beneath the chandeliers. Every camera flash captured moments of beauty, every smile polished for perfection. Amara floated through her reception like royalty, her gown glittering with every step, her confidence restoring the peace that had flickered earlier in the evening. But under the surface, something restless stirred. The older woman, the quiet server, had caught her eye again, this time lingering too close to the head table. Amara noticed her hands trembling as she reached for a glass, her gaze fixed on Chinedu, not out of admiration, but something far deeper, something that made Amara's heart clench without reason. For a moment their eyes met, the bride and the woman in uniform, and the air shifted. The woman smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile that seemed to hold years of untold pain. Amara's brows furrowed. She whispered to a waiter beside her, "Who is she?" The young man shrugged nervously. I think she's with the catering team, ma'am." But Amara wasn't convinced. She turned to find her husband, only to see him standing a few feet away, frozen, staring at the same woman with an expression she had never seen before, half shock, half guilt. The whispers began again, circling like wind through leaves. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. One of the bridesmaids muttered, "She's been staring at the groom all night." The tension grew heavy, pressing down on every heartbeat in the room. Then it happened, small, clumsy, and world-ending all at once. The older woman approached to serve wine, her hand shaking slightly. The tray tilted, and a splash of red wine landed across Amara's pure white gown. The hall fell silent. Gasps cut through the air. The bride looked down at the stain spreading like an accusation, then back at the trembling server. "Are you out of your mind?" Amara's voice cracked, raw with disbelief. The woman began to apologize, her voice weak, trembling. "I'm so sorry, my daughter." But the word daughter stopped the bride's heart cold. In that split second, emotion replaced reason. Anger, confusion, humiliation, all collided into one impulsive act. Amara's hand rose, swift and sharp, and struck the woman across the face. The sound echoed through the hall, loud, jarring, final. Glasses trembled on tables, someone screamed, and a child began to cry. The woman staggered, her hand pressed to her cheek, eyes glistening not with pain, but sorrow. She whispered, "My daughter." Again, softer this time, before turning away. The room froze. Every phone, every camera caught the moment. Chinedu stood paralyzed, his world collapsing in silence. He looked at his bride, trembling, and then at the woman, his mother, standing with tears streaming down her face. He wanted to speak, to explain, to stop time, but his voice betrayed him. His secret had finally found its way into the light, not with words, but with a single, unforgettable slap. The guests didn't know what to do. Some whispered that the bride had lost control. Others said the server had crossed a line. But no one knew the truth that hung in the air like smoke. The truth of a son's silence, a mother's longing, and a love that had been buried too deep to survive the moment. And for those watching, for everyone still holding their breath, the narrator pauses. If you're still here with us, drop "I'm still here" in the comments. Let's see who's truly watching till the end. The hall remained frozen in disbelief. The cameras flashed one last time, capturing faces twisted in shock and heartbreak. And as silence swallowed the music, only one thing was certain. That slap would echo far beyond that ballroom. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. The sound of that slap still hung in the air, louder than the music that had once filled the room. Amara stood frozen, her chest heaving, her palms still tingling from the impact. She tried to speak, but her voice came out fractured. She ruined my dress. She called me her daughter." Her words stumbled, falling apart before they reached the crowd. The once joyous room had become a storm of whispers and judgment. Every pair of eyes turned toward her, not with admiration, but disbelief. The servers rushed in, two of them gently holding the trembling woman by her arms. "Ma'am, please, sit down," one whispered, but the woman shook her head faintly, her breath shallow. Her gaze found Chinedu across the room. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, endless sadness. He stood by the entrance now, his face pale, his lips parted as though the air itself had turned too heavy to breathe. Amara looked at him, desperate for reassurance, for any sign that he understood her side, but he couldn't move. His body was still, his spirit shattered between two worlds, the life he built and the one he buried. Guests began to murmur louder now. Did she call her daughter? Is she related to the groom? Why does she look at him like that? The questions rippled across the tables like a wave of unease. One of Amara's relatives stepped forward, whispering, "Maybe she's drunk." But no, this wasn't confusion or chaos. This was truth, crawling its way into the open. The woman tried to steady herself, clutching her chest, her breathing uneven. "Please," she whispered, reaching toward Chinedu. "My son." The words barely escaped her lips before her knees buckled. Gasps filled the room as she collapsed to the floor. The servers cried out, rushing to her side, and one of them called for help. Amara stepped back, trembling, as the crowd circled closer. Then, as one of the waiters lifted her arm, a small locket slipped from her wrist, falling onto the marble floor with a soft metallic clink. It flipped open, and there, inside the tiny frame, was a faded photo, a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, smiling toothlessly into the camera. Beneath the image, faint but visible, were the initials CE. The room fell completely silent. Chinedu's hand covered his mouth, his body shaking as he stepped closer. The photo was unmistakable. That baby was him. The same photo his mother had once kept on her nightstand, the same picture he hadn't seen in decades. He knelt beside her, his voice breaking. "Mama." A ripple of shock swept through the hall. Guests covered their mouths, unable to process what they were witnessing. The bride's hand dropped to her side, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every eye turned to her now, not with envy, not with admiration, but with something far heavier: pity. And in that suffocating silence, the truth, once buried in pride, shame, and misunderstanding, finally began to reveal itself. The bride's tears blurred her vision, the groom's voice trembled with guilt, and the woman who had come only to witness her son's happiness now lay unconscious before them. And with that, the truth began to bleed through the silence. The room had emptied, but the echoes of gasps and whispers still lingered in the air like ghosts that refused to leave. The once perfect wedding now stood in ruins, flowers wilted under the weight of guilt, music silenced by revelation. Amara sat alone in the bridal suite, her makeup streaked with tears, her reflection fractured in the mirror before her. The door creaked open softly. Chinedu stepped in. His face was pale, his tie loosened, his voice trembling as though every word cost him breath. "Amara." She turned slowly, her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them was heavier than any accusation. "Do you know what you just did?" he asked quietly, each syllable cutting through the room. "That woman you slapped." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "She's my mother." The words landed like a thunderclap. Amara's body went still, her hands trembling as her eyes widened in horror. No, that's not possible." Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. She was serving drinks." He shook his head. "She was only there to see me happy." His voice faltered. "I thought I was protecting her from shame, from you, from this world I built without her." As he spoke, the scene blurred into flashbacks. A boy in torn school shoes, a woman selling fruits in the rain, counting coins by candlelight, whispering prayers over an empty pot, her hands rough, her eyes hopeful, her voice, "My son will wear a suit one day, not this dust, not this hunger." The images dissolved back to the present. Chinedu's voice trembled with rage and regret. "She gave up everything for me, and I let the world make me believe she wasn't enough." Amara fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't know, she whispered, clutching her chest. "I thought she was just—" Her words broke off into a cry. "Please tell me she's okay." Chinedu turned away, his voice distant, almost hollow. "She's resting now. But the damage is done." He stared at the floor, lost in a storm of guilt. "I spent years building an empire to make her proud, and tonight, the woman I love most in this world struck the woman who made me who I am." Amara reached for him, but he stepped back. "You can't fix this with tears, Amara. Some wounds cut deeper than love." Her voice quivered. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I only wanted this day to be perfect." He looked at her, eyes burning with pain. Perfection without kindness is poison. And for a long moment neither spoke. Only the sound of Amara's sobs filled the room, echoing off the golden walls that once symbolized joy, but now reflected nothing but shame. What do you do when love turns into shame? When the person you swore to honor becomes the reason your world collapses? Sometimes it's not the slap that hurts the most. It's the silence that follows. The morning after the wedding was nothing short of chaos. The sun rose over a city buzzing with whispers. What was meant to be a celebration of love had turned into a spectacle of shame. The videos spread faster than wildfire. Bride slaps server at her own wedding. No one knew the truth, but everyone had an opinion. Some called her heartless, others called her cursed, and Amara, once adored for her beauty and poise, now hid behind drawn curtains, trembling at the sound of her own name. Chinedu was nowhere to be found. For the first time in his life, he turned off his phone. The man who once led a company now couldn't even lead his own thoughts. Between love and loyalty, he stood paralyzed. His mother lay in a hospital bed, her frail hands resting beside the same locket that had shattered his world. Machines hummed softly around her, the steady rhythm of survival whispering, "She's still here, but barely." And Amara? She sat in silence, scrolling through her own destruction. The comments cut deeper than any slap. This is karma. She got what she deserved. No real woman would treat a worker like that. But buried beneath her shame, something inside her began to whisper back. A quiet, painful truth. She hadn't lashed out because of arrogance. It was fear, insecurity. The pressure to be perfect had twisted her into something unrecognizable. Every flaw she saw in others was a reflection of the fear she carried within herself. For days, she replayed the moment in her mind. The sound of glass, the sting in her palm, the look in the old woman's eyes. That wasn't the face of defiance. It was the face of love and recognition. She hadn't just slapped a stranger. She had struck a wound she didn't know existed. Meanwhile, Chinedu sat by his mother's hospital bed, his head bowed. He whispered apologies between sobs, clutching her hand. "Mama, I'm sorry. I should have invited you. I should have fought harder for you." She didn't respond, but her breathing steadied. It was as though even in her silence, she forgave him. Back at home, Amara picked up her phone, typing and deleting a message to Chinedu over and over again. How do you say sorry for something like that? How do you ask forgiveness from the woman you unknowingly destroyed? The media continued to feast on their pain. The wedding sponsors withdrew their deals. Influencers dissected her apology video word for word, searching for insincerity. And yet, through the noise, something began to change. A few voices, quiet but firm, started saying, "People make mistakes. Let her learn." The world is quick to judge what it does not understand. But sometimes pride is not arrogance. It's a disguise. A fragile shield protecting a heart that's terrified of being seen. And forgiveness, too, can come disguised, in silence, in second chances, in the smallest acts of grace. As the hospital clock ticked past midnight, Chinedu looked at his mother and whispered, "If she asks for forgiveness, should I give it?" And somewhere, far away, Amara whispered into the darkness, "If I ask for forgiveness, would he still listen?" The night answered with silence, but sometimes silence carries more meaning than words ever could. Night fell heavy over the hospital that never slept. The hallways were dim, the air thick with antiseptic and quiet hope. Outside room 207, a figure stood cloaked in hesitation. It was Amara. No makeup, no designer gown. Just a trembling woman holding a letter, her eyes swollen from nights of regret. She hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even Chinedu. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't come for redemption. She came for peace. Slowly she stepped inside. The soft hum of machines filled the silence. There, on the bed, lay the woman she had wronged, the mother of the man she still loved. Her face was peaceful, fragile, yet radiant even in stillness. Amara's breath caught. She wanted to say, "I'm sorry," out loud, but her voice refused to come. Instead, she walked closer, her hand trembling as she placed her wedding ring beside the hospital bed, a small circle of gold that had once symbolized eternity, now repurposed as a silent apology. Next to it, she laid a folded letter, edges creased from hours of hesitation. Inside, her words were simple, handwritten with shaky honesty. "I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the pain. But I want you to know that your son's love made me forget where I came from, and you reminded me what love really is. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I pray someday you find it in your heart to give it. Even if it's not for me, let it be for him." A tear slipped from her cheek, landing softly on the page before she turned to leave. Her footsteps were silent, yet each one echoed through her soul. Moments later, the room stirred. The mother's eyes fluttered open. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the dim light, her gaze falling on the letter and the small ring beside it. With trembling hands, she picked them up. As she read, her lips quivered, and tears began to fall. Not tears of anger, but of release, of understanding, of love that refused to die, even when wounded. And from the doorway, Chinedu stood quietly, unseen by either woman. He had followed his instincts that night, something in his heart telling him she would come. He watched as his mother held the ring to her chest, whispering softly, "Let her heal." The moment shattered him, not from pain, but from grace. He stepped closer, his eyes wet, his chest tight. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It enters the room quietly, like a breath, and changes everything. The night outside grew calm. For the first time since the wedding, peace lingered in the air. A story that began with a slap was now ending with silent redemption. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't make wrongs right, but it gives the heart room to breathe again. That night, 3 hearts began to heal. Not through words, but through quiet courage. What would you have done if you were in Chinedu's place? Walk away or forgive? Tell us in the comments below. Your answer might just help someone else find their own peace. Days passed and the noise faded. The cameras turned elsewhere, but for those 3 lives, time had slowed. Chinedu visited his mother every morning, bringing her flowers she never asked for but always smiled at. Amara never returned to the mansion. She moved quietly, choosing solitude over spectacle. Yet somewhere deep inside, something had shifted, a kind of peace that only comes after you've faced the truth about yourself. The hospital eventually discharged Chinedu's mother. When she stepped into the sunlight, she looked stronger, her eyes softer. She held the ring on a chain around her neck, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that even broken beginnings can lead to healing. Weeks later, Chinedu met Amara at a small cafe, away from the world's gaze. They didn't speak for a long time. Words weren't needed. The silence between them no longer carried anger, only understanding. She whispered, "I'm sorry," and he nodded, eyes glistening. Forgiveness wasn't instant, but it had begun. Sometimes that's enough. The wedding photos that once felt tainted now sat quietly in a drawer. But one picture remained on Chinedu's desk, his mother's faint smile from that night, before everything fell apart. Every time he looked at it, he remembered one thing. No matter how far we rise, we are never too high to bow for grace. Life has a way of humbling even the proudest hearts. True wealth isn't gold, or glass, or the applause of the world. It's grace. Grace to forgive, grace to be forgiven, and grace to begin again, no matter how broken the story once was. The sound of a slow heartbeat fades in, steady, gentle, human. A faint image appears, the wedding photo dissolving into pure white light. The heartbeat slows, then stops. Silence. If this story touched your heart, tap that like button. It helps more people find stories that remind us what really matters. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more true emotional stories every week. Because somewhere out there, someone's story might just heal your own.